Hey everybody, so if you haven't seen them, you should check out the patch notes for the upcoming 1.1.1 update scheduled for Tuesday, August 8th. What's most notable among the changes are a couple of balancing changes primarily aimed at bringing up both the power levels, increasing late game survivability, and speeding up the combat and enjoyment of early game leveling with sorcerers and barbarians, to hopefully more of an appropriate place after all of the prior balancing passes and bug fixes. A couple of days ago, I decided to take a little break from my grind to 100 on my rogue and give leveling another barbarian a shot, as I never ended up making it to 100 on my barb in the preseason. And I had a bit of an idea that might be interesting and helpful for anybody who may be interested in starting an alt character build after the patch, might be starting the season a little bit late, or might perhaps even be new to Diablo 4. I wanted to create kind of a leveling diary, following my character's progression from level 1 to 100, walking you through my process every step of the way, from when to upgrade gear, what skills to pick, in what order, and all of the little experimentation in between, what content I'm playing while I'm leveling, when I decide to change world tiers, when I get my first legendaries, which items I'm imprinting, stats I'm rerolling, everything. I also want to keep track of a few major leveling milestones, like how long it takes to progress between each, the average damage output of my character, and generally how my character feels to play every step of the way. I'm hoping that you'll be able to get a sense for what you might expect, perhaps even as a reference point for your own character progression to get a handle on your own progress and power level. I want to not only share all of the tips and tricks that I've picked up throughout the process, but also some of the mistakes and lessons I've learned along the way. Let's hop right into it. This is Grandpa Joe. He's my new barbarian for Season 1. As this was an alt character, I had the ability to skip the campaign, but if you're new, this isn't an option, and even if it was, I'd recommend you play through the main campaign anyway. The story's great, and the progression throughout the story has you leveling at a perfectly reasonable pace, although just keep in mind that you won't be able to directly compare one-to-one your progress versus mine. From all of the renown I gathered in the preseason and all of the rest that I grinded out with my rogue since the season started, I'm starting with a handful of additional skill points, stat bonuses, a nice nest egg of gold and materials for crafting and upgrading, as well as the additional XP and salvaging buffs that I'm getting from seasonal bonuses. I say this so that you don't feel bad if you're a little bit behind on any of these things. You'll just want to be sure to supplement your learning on the side about how you might want to tackle gathering all of your renown, as I'm not going to be covering that stuff in particular. But nevertheless, following along with my character's progression is still definitely going to be relevant and valuable. So, back to Grandpa Joe. I'm not sure yet exactly what build I'm going to be making here. I'm not going to be following any build guides, I'm mostly going to be winging it based on my prior experience from the preseason. So after skipping the campaign, I find myself in Kyovashad, level 1, with 10 skill points at my disposal, so the first thing I need to do is pick my basic attack. Now I find that what my basic attack does and what its upgrades provide me generally goes pretty far in helping me determine the high level direction that I want to take my builds. And not only that, but it's also going to be what I'm going to be spending most of my time in combat using, especially in the early game, so I really want to pick one that I enjoy, one that's fun to use, feels satisfying, and at least decently powerful. I had experience with Lunging Strike from my last Hoda build, and there were a few nice things about it. We'll get to the details and trade-offs later, as I'll be experimenting a bit with each of them. I've had a bunch of experience with Hammer of the Ancients, aka Hoda, and I also did a little bit with Whirlwind before that, so I wanted to try something new for a core skill. After looking at the other options, namely Upheaval, Double Swing, and Rend, Upheaval looked the most interesting on paper, so I went with that to start. With a few more skill points left to allocate, I opted to put a point into Rallying Cry, which provides me with a shout skill that does two extremely convenient things. Increases my movement speed and resource generation, immediately attempting to address some of the issues that early game characters are notorious for having, being painfully slow and struggling with resource management. I know I'm going to want to make many further such improvements a priority for a while in the early game, making this initial progression much more enjoyable. And with a few more remaining points, I took a brief look at more of the skill options, ensuring I not only looked at what the skills do, but also consider how much they improve with each additional skill point, how long their cooldowns are, and what their upgrades provide me, so I can get the most out of every point early on. Now with my remaining points, it made most sense to fully upgrade Rallying Cry to give me the ability to become unstoppable, allowing me to get out of sticky situations in a pinch, as well as granting me Fury upon use and additional Fury generation, with the remaining point going back into my core ability, attempting to maximize its damage so that I can ensure I can kill as fast as possible. I'd spent too much time in town already, so let's get into the action. The first time I used Rallying Cry, I was reminded how nice it was to have that movement speed buff, especially coming straight from a level 90-something rogue with basically max movement speed all the time. I made my way over to the first pack of mobs I could find so that I could whack them a few times to generate enough fury to see what Upheaval felt like, and was initially surprised with how cool the animation looked, especially against the skeletons, which might be the most satisfying enemies to do this against. After just a couple of enemies killed, we've already leveled up about a third of the way to level 3. I figured at this point, until we're able to move on to the next section of the skill tree, I might as well make progress towards maxing out my core ability, so one more point into upheaval. About 8 seconds later, I hit level 3, and got about 80% of the way to 4. Unlocking the next section of the skill tree, I knew I'd eventually be taking Warcry, but the next passive skill I moused over was Swiftness, and seeing that with 3 points into this I'd be adding 12% movement speed, I decided that that's where the next 3 points were going to be going, without any hesitation. Now, it didn't take long for me to get to level 4, and along the way getting a decent feel for upheaval. So far it felt a little bit awkward, to be honest. The animations were quite satisfying, and the little bit of extended range that it had was a nice touch, although the wind-up time for the attack made it definitely feel a bit clunky. When I press a button to attack, it's generally because I want to attack right now, so having my attack hit nearly 1 second after I click my mouse definitely diminishes that satisfaction. Now, when paying attention to these animations and getting a feel for the attack, I suddenly remembered that barbarians have the ability to assign specific weapons to specific attacks, which is super important. Your basic attack is used more for generating fury than it is for doing damage, so you really want to hit as fast as possible, not as hard as possible. But the game defaults to automatically selecting which weapon you use for each attack, generally based on its DPS, so first thing I generally want to do with my barbs is assign my basic attack to my dual-wielded weapons to maximize their attack speed. Now, I also took this opportunity to see if using upheaval with my sword rather than my mace would feel any different, and in general it didn't really. I ended up accidentally finishing a side quest and was given a little cash as a reward that included my first magic item, a short sword that was a 12 DPS upgrade. I then decided to enter my first cellar. Now, there were already a few more very important things I had either missed or forgotten at this point. Reading chat instead of the handy loading screen tooltip made me miss the reminder that at level 5 as a barbarian unlocks the weapon expertise class feature, allowing me to level up my skill with particular weapon types, as well as eventually giving me additional passive bonuses. And after actually hitting level 5, I was so excited to loot the chest and put that last skill point into swiftness that I hadn't noticed the big pop-up on screen telling me that I had actually unlocked it. Now, what I did remember, however, was that I hadn't yet crafted any elixirs, so I went back to town and took a look at what my options were, eventually just choosing the easiest and cheapest one to craft. I'll be honest, I almost never look at what the actual buffs from the elixirs are, at least until the endgame. Instead, all I really care about is that 5% increase to XP gained, and from now until level 100, my goal is to not go a moment playing the game without an active elixir. They're so cheap, and it's a no-brainer. Now, I also remembered that I have access to my horse straight from the start, so I'm going to try to use that as much as I can when I'm traversing long distances on the map, while my character's a bit slow moving through the overworld and I don't have many waypoints. Next, I made my way to the nearest dungeon I could get to that I had not yet completed this season, because doing so would unlock whatever Codex of Power aspect was attached to that dungeon, which would grant me the ability to utilize the Occultist for imprinting legendary aspects as soon as I get my first rare item drop. I already have a ton of really useful aspects in my Codex of Power saved up for my first character that are going to make the early game grind infinitely more enjoyable. Now, while in this dungeon, I was able to upgrade a few pieces of gear, focusing primarily on each piece of gear's main stat, trying to get as much damage and armor as possible, as right now none of the gear has really exciting or meaningful stats that make much of a difference until you start getting the rare or yellow items. I also came across my first malignant enemy, one of the new Season 1 mechanics, and then suddenly realized something I hadn't known until now, that you actually have to do the seasonal campaign with every new character you make. I figured now was a good time as ever to start, so that was next on my to-do list. After chugging through the dungeon and fully clearing it, I had hit level 9, and I made my way to the next major town to grab the waypoint there, at which point I was reminded about another thing I'd forgotten about, all of that unclaimed renown bonus XP and gold, so I went and took care of that. At this point, I wanted to mix it up a little bit, so I decided to change up my basic and core skills to try a new combination. I changed my basic attack to Frenzy, which is something that I hadn't used since my dual-wielding ethereal Breath of the Dying Berserker Axe wielding god-tier Barb back in the days of Diablo 2, and then changed Upheaval to Hoda as I finally had the ability to choose a weapon mastery skill, and Hoda coupled with Steel Grasp, which pulls distant enemies all in together right in front of you, was a powerful and enjoyable combination that I wanted to try on this new guy here. I then headed over to talk to Cormond to start the new seasonal campaign. Now, at this point, Frenzy was already feeling a bit clunky, needing multiple hits to gain attack speed, each doing barely any damage or having that satisfying thunk that Lunging Strike had, so right after hitting level 10, I swapped it for Bash, which looked promising as it also had the added benefit of stunning enemies, and then I chose to upgrade Steel Grasp, which makes enemies vulnerable, one of the most important aspects of this attack, and something that is going to be incredibly crucial to controlling my damage output for the next 40 or 50 levels. I then noticed that I had gotten my first rare item at some point, and it was actually a pretty amazing one. A pair of boots that had a high roll on strength, which was going to help my damage output, but more importantly, it had the implicit stat of granting a brief movement speed bonus after evading. The movement speed buffs were really starting to add up, and now that I had my first rare item and had unlocked the Occultist, I could improve it even more. So I headed on over there and imprinted these new boots with the Ghostwalker aspect, which increases my movement speed another 10% while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after, as well as giving me the ability to move freely through enemies, a massive quality of life upgrade. Now, shortly after leaving town on my way to make progress through the storyline, I found my second rare item, a two-handed axe with a huge boost to my DPS, as well as plus 16 to my strength, adding even more. Now, as I was starting to kill faster and get more regular loot upgrades, the decision-making process for what to keep and what to upgrade was beginning to get just a little bit more nuanced. Now, still being very early, there wasn't going to be any massive game-changing upgrades very often, but I knew that I could still benefit from putting some thought into the comparison process. Take these new gloves, for example. They have a bunch more armor, which is nice, but they also have a buff to intelligence, whereas my current gloves have the same buff, but instead to strength. So the decision between these two gloves ultimately comes down to one of more offense or more defense. And at this point, I wasn't really at risk of dying and knew that I wouldn't be for some time, and it'd be far more likely I'd come across enemies that aren't likely to kill me, but also take way too long for me to kill, a really annoying combination. So I opted to keep my current gloves, and going forward was going to be prioritizing maximizing damage and mobility pretty much before anything else. So that's what I focused on as I began replacing all of my magic items with rares. At this point, I was already approaching the movement speed cap for short bursts of time with my new boots, evading and using Rallying Cry, which I can't stress enough makes the early game exploration and leveling infinitely more enjoyable. Now, after getting notified that I had just reached Axe rank 1 because of that new axe I picked up, I finally realized that I've had access to that weapon expertise mechanic for nearly 7 levels now, although it'd be a few more levels still until I'd be able to select a technique to gain even more benefits. Now, on my way to the first Varshan fight, and once I actually get into it and struggle killing him quickly, I hope it makes more sense now why I care mostly about movement speed and DPS over everything else. The key to combat at this point is to try to maximize how much fury I generate before using Hoda, as the damage it does scales based on how much fury you have when you use it. And hitting the boss with Steel Grasp whenever available to keep him vulnerable for as long as possible increases the damage done to him during those periods. Now, I was able to improve a few gear pieces incrementally along the way to the next milestone in the campaign, at which point I was given a reward that included my first rare amulet. I promptly took that amulet straight to the Occultist and imprinted the Rapid aspect on it from the Codex, granting my basic skill a 23% increase to its attack speed, which would help me ramp up Fury much faster, and because I have so much extra materials left over from my rogue, I decided to throw the Edgemasters aspect on my two-handed axe as well, which would further augment the damage boost I get based on the Fury I have when I attack with Hoda. Though even though I'd likely be getting upgrades to my two-handed axe soon, it didn't actually matter much because Hoda uses my two-handed bludgeoning weapon, so the DPS on the slashing weapon doesn't really matter for my damage output. But what does matter are the other affixes on this weapon, as it's a stat stick. And this axe has good rolls on crit damage, strength, and core skill damage, all 3 incredibly useful stats. So I figured it'd be very unlikely that I would be getting a two-handed stat stick with a better collection of affixes anytime soon, so it was worth the investment. Making my way to the next milestone of the campaign, everything escalated quite quickly. And I don't know how good Whirlwind ever was, because I've never played Whirlwind past like level 11. And I experienced my first death at the hands of a level 35 skeleton captain. Now, it took me a moment to realize that the items that I needed to collect for this quest were located inside strongholds, areas where the monster level was more than 20 levels higher than my barbarian. If I wanted to make any more progress through this campaign right now, I was going to have to be a bit more resourceful. Getting the first item was easy enough once I realized that I didn't actually have to kill anything, and as soon as I knew what I was looking for, although the second item proved to be a bit more difficult. In order to open up the pathway to the second item, I was going to need to kill the first mini-boss at another stronghold, as well as any of the monster waves that came with it, which in all honesty probably took more effort than anything that I've had to do in Diablo, second only to killing Uber Lilith, which you can also check out in another video I did. Now, the mobs were dealt with easily enough, although the Fallen Overseer mini-boss did more than half my life's damage with each hit, and I only had 9 basic potions at my disposal. Now, after dying for my second, third, And 4th times, while attempting this fight, I knew I was going to need to be more careful with the damage I was allowing myself to take, my potion usage, as well as being more purposeful with my movement and my use of dodges. Something easily overlooked during combat, as in Diablo 4, you honestly very rarely need to actually pay attention to that stuff. Now eventually, I managed to kill the Overseer, with my reward being an axe that I couldn't use for another 20 levels, but unfortunately it wasn't over yet. I still had to get by a few groups of level 35 mobs while at half health and with no potions to grab the item I came here for in the first place. An item that I couldn't remember the location of, leading to one more death before I made my way over to successfully retrieve the item I needed, at which point I promptly got out of dodge. Now, getting the 3rd and final item was done without much fuss, and I eventually hit level 14 on my way through clearing the next dungeon in the seasonal campaign. Now, on my way back to town, I came across a few events that netted me the XP I needed to get myself to level 15, my first major leveling milestone. Now, as of level 15, these are my stats, and this is what my Barb's gear is looking like at the moment. It took me just about 2 hours to get my first 15 levels, and the max damage output from Hoda that I recorded at this point was between 7 and 800 damage. So, what do you guys think? Do you want to see more of my progress leveling up this new character? Is my walking through all of this stuff helpful in any way? Did you learn anything new or useful, or is there anything that you'd still want to know? Let me know what you think, and if there's enough interest, I'll definitely continue. Either way, thank you guys for watching until the end. If you want to see more Diablo content from me, be sure to give the video a like and sub to the channel. I'm painfully close to hitting 200,000 subscribers, a milestone I've been trying to hit for quite a while. And feel free to drop by my Twitch stream anytime. I'm live basically every day, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I look forward to chatting with you all. Until next time, we'll see you later.